it's a fact of reality that the wealthier people get better quality things, but I don't think that's an injustice.
It's not an injustice when you say better quality things. It is an injustice if the better quality thing that you're talking about is medical care, education, and police protection.
I don't think there's anything magical about healthcare or police protection or anything. Whatever field you're talking about, if you're wealthier, you're going to be able to afford better quality.
According to your worldview, wealthy people would be able to fund their own police stations more adequately, thus resulting in faster police responses and better overall police protection. They would have better police protection.
That's true of anything. They can afford better restaurants. They can afford
better restaurants. Don't matter. That's not a life or death kind of situation, the way that calling the police if you're in the case of a fucking murder is.
That's why everyone would have at least a baseline level of police. And
how are they going to have okay, I'm going to make you answer this question. How are they going to have a baseline if you're not doing taxation?
You had made a comment very early in the show before you even started the Crowder clip. You said you were a capitalist, but you're also a social democrat. I think the capitalist part was in reference to the fact that you somehow monetize your content. But anyway, that just caught my attention because I think capitalism is actually not consistent with being a Democrat. The way I think of capitalism is that it's in favor of a freedom, to put it very simply, which I think entails no taxes. So taxes coerce people. It's a coercive way of getting revenue for the governments. But if you favor taxes, then you're violating people's freedom, which I think is I
would actually argue
a violation of capitalism.
I think that it's my worldview that allows more freedom, because what you have is a society in which people are able to get health care and people are able to work a job in which they're making adequate money that they can survive and live comfortably. You have less freedom if you're sick or if you're dying or if you're poor. You have less freedom in those cases. Taxation is a necessary part of living in a society. We all share this space. We have to be able to put something in collectively if we expect the government to benefit us in any way. And so paying taxes in order to have health care for everybody, in order to have stronger unions, in order to, ideally I would like a UBI at some point even, or UBI or something like that. This, if anything, allows for more freedom. I would be okay paying more in taxes if it also meant that I would be saving money when I go to the doctor.
Okay. So I think we likely have different definitions of freedom. So maybe we could talk about that. The way I understand freedom is I understand it as being the absence of coercion. If you were forcing somebody, meaning physically forcing them, or threatening to use force against them, like with a gun, or threatening to haul them off to jail, then that would be a violation of someone's freedom.
Well, not necessarily, because we have, again, more freedom by paying taxes. So because I'm paying taxes, that means the police are funded. That means the fire department is funded. That gives me more freedom from having my shit stolen or my house burned down.
I don't think, for one thing, I don't think you need to coerce people in order to fund the police. I think it's in my rational self-interest to fund the police. So and I think many other people would be voluntarily willing to fund the police so that I'm protected from criminals.
Why would you expect people to just voluntarily do this? Look at the way that corporations have acted in the past. Unless there is some kind of a government regulation put on top of them, they will cut every corner in the book in order to save money. Isn't this why we just had that problem with the forest fires? Wasn't it because one of these massive energy grid companies weren't abiding by certain standards because it was saving them money?
Well, hold on. I think why would people do it? I mean, it's in my self-interest. We can just take me, for instance. It's in my self-interest to be protected from criminals, so I'm going to donate some money to the police
Well, what if
or
other
to the
people think it's in
military.
their self-interest to be protected from criminals, but they don't have the money to donate to police?
Well, I don't think it's necessary that everyone donates. I mean, people can donate at different amounts. You could have billionaires donating. You could have millionaires
You realize this would
donating.
be
People
less,
have,
again, less freedom, because then you would see the type of police protection unbalanced. The wealthy, since they're able to put more money in, would have a much stronger police force, but the poor, because they can't put as much money in, would have a much weaker police force. Thus, again, less freedom for the people who don't have a lot of money.
I think the police, you don't get more police protection by being wealthier, but I think you could get more private security. So
Would
if
you
you're
not get
rich,
less
you can
police
hire.
protection if you weren't donating to your local police?
I think you would just get less private security. So you might not be able to afford your own private security guard, but you would still get the baseline sort of police protection that everyone
How?
gets
How would that be funded without taxes?
by voluntary contributions, among
And
other
what I'm
means. I
saying
mean,
is,
there.
what if there's a local community that is not making enough money to do voluntary contributions? Or if they are, it's not enough to actually lead to adequate police protection for the community.
I don't know why they wouldn't be. I mean, security from criminals is such a key thing. It's like almost like, I don't know if it's on the level of food, but it's certainly a very fundamental, basic need
So
in
what
order to
happens to
have
the single mother who has to work 2 jobs just to get by and pay rent and put food on the table every night for her kids? How is she going to donate to the police?
I don't. I don't see the problem. I mean, if she can, I mean, she's got kids, right? So she should. First of all, I don't think every individual has to donate, and so maybe in this case with this mother, she finds it more valuable to put her money elsewhere, maybe just to support her kids. But I don't think that means nobody, the community, is going to donate
What if the
to the
community
police.
in general is poor? So, for example, right now, like a lot of these minority communities have less than stellar schools because they're funded by property tax. And because they're getting less tax dollars, you have a shittier school. Why would this not be the same thing, just with voluntary donations when it comes to the police?
I'm not sure I get the analogy with schools. I mean, schools. If you're talking about public schools, those are tax funded, and I think, I mean, those wouldn't exist. There would be private
But
schools.
what I'm saying is they're tax funded, yes, but because those communities are poor, they're not paying as much in taxes, which translates to shittier schools. How would this not be exactly the same if we're talking about a police department in which they're supposed to be voluntarily donating to this police?
So you're saying the school. I'm trying to understand the logic here. So the schools are poor because the people are poor and can't pay a lot of taxes to support the schools,
Yes.
and then the idea is they're also not going to be able to pay for. They're also going to have poor police because they can't afford good police because they're
I'm
poor.
saying that even right now with taxation, we still have a problem with schools not getting adequate funding. So poor communities have shittier schools. What you're saying is let's get rid of taxation altogether and instead leave this up to voluntary donations. Why do you think that voluntary donations would lead to a better outcome for that poor community if even right now when there's mandated taxation, they're not giving enough taxes to adequately fund the school?
I don't think well, I think there's a lot going on here. One thing is, I'm not sure a lack of money is the problem with low quality schooling. Or at least I don't know that it's the main problem. I think it could be partly the teaching quality.
Because
And
maybe they can't afford to pay teachers adequate funds?
well, I think a lot of teachers don't know very well how to teach. I think there's a lot of problems with the pedagogy in America, um, the sort of contents and methodology of teaching. I think there are severe problems in those areas where even if you throw money at them, that's not going to fix the knowledge deficit, which I think is leading to a
Well,
lot
a
of the
lot of it
problems
is also
here.
because of poverty too. Like it doesn't, for example, allow for the same resources so that you're not able to study as much at home or you're not able to get as much done at home in order to achieve a better education. This oftentimes stems from poverty specifically.
I don't think the way out of poverty is coercion. I think it's freedom. I mean, that's a pretty abstract
But
statement,
what
but
you're talking about is less freedom.
well, I think we still disagree on what freedom is. So I'm not yet persuaded that it is. I think this sort of system I advocate is actually more free. People will have more opportunities. People will be wealthier and better off than if people are being coerced. I think
So
coercion is
the discrepancies
anti-prosperity.
occur largely because public school districts in Connecticut and in much of America are run by local cities and towns and are funded by local property taxes. High poverty areas have lower home values and collect less taxes, and so can't raise as much money as a place like Darien or Greenwich, where homes are worth millions of dollars. So
I
you're
don't
saying
think
it's coercion. I don't think it's coercion to pay a degree of taxes to get something. You're getting a benefit here. You're getting a school. You're getting protection from police. You're getting protection from fire. You're paying into something in order to receive a benefit. Society would not be able to function without a degree of taxation. Now, we can talk about how much taxation is appropriate or inappropriate, but when you're talking about just abolishing taxation and relying on willing donations, this would not do anything except lead to even greater discrepancies between rich people and poor people as far as education, police protection, etc.
okay. There's a lot going on here. One thing you brought up is inequality, which I don't think per se is a bad thing. Just the fact that someone has more money than another person,
That's not the
I don't
problem.
think
The problem would be that because they have more money, they are able to receive better funding for their schools and they're able to receive better police protection.
okay. But the fact that you can afford better things if you're wealthier, I don't think is a bad thing. I think that's yeah. I mean, rich people can afford
It's not a bad thing to
more or better.
afford nicer things. It's a problem when you are receiving better education and better police protection because you have money, as opposed to people who are not as wealthy, who are now receiving lesser simply because they don't have enough money.
Well, what I'm saying is, like, with something like police protection, I don't think it is lesser in terms of the police. Now, in terms of private security, yeah, that would be lesser. But
How
there's
would the
a
police
kind of
wait, no, hold on. How would a local police station function if they were only relying on donations from the community?
that just reminded me of another point. I don't think donations are the only mechanism of funding. It's one method, but there are other mechanisms like lotteries, which have actually been used historically in some places. That's another way of raising money that the state can do.
What do you mean
There,
lotteries?
the state could run a lottery and sell tickets, and then
So
that's a way of
encourage
raising.
gambling?
Yeah, states do that sometimes.
I
I mean,
okay.
like the Super
You're
Lotto or
basically just
whatever.
like, "Hey, let's get everybody into gambling and then maybe we can do a yard sale and then you'll get some good police protection." Really? This is
You're
pretty
saying this is
ridiculous, bro.
another. I don't see why it's ridiculous. I think historically lotteries have actually been used.
It's ridiculous because what you're advocating for, the logical follow through is that wealthy people get a way better education and get better police protection, which only means then that wealthy people are going to continue getting good education, continue being wealthy, and it's going to be a vicious cycle. Then there's going to be a divide where then you have poor people who are not able to give as much money to their police and to their schools. So you're going to have a generation of poor people leading to the next generation of poor people. It's going to be a vicious cycle. But America benefits when everybody is educated, when everybody has adequate police protection. That's when America truly benefits. What you're talking about right now would actually lead to a world in which it's just the wealthy who are highly educated, going to college, and have police protection.
I think that's not true. There would be police protection for everyone. What I've been saying is that there's additional protection you can get through private security if you're wealthy. And yeah, that's not going to be the same for everyone, but there will be a baseline police protection for everybody.
How would there be a baseline police protection for the community that can't afford to donate to the police?
I think everyone can afford, as a community at least, to donate to a police force. It's so basic a need. It's
do
like
you think that
is,
maybe like,
that
hey, requiring people willingly, quote unquote, willingly donate in order to ensure that they have somebody to call if they're getting robbed or getting murdered is a level of coercion?
That if you're threatening to call someone off
no,
to
you're
jail,
not requiring it. You're not saying I'm going to throw you in jail. What the logical follow through though, again, is unless I donate to the police, I will not have adequate protection if something is to happen to me. How is that not coercion? Now you're just coercing people to donate under the threat that they could otherwise be murdered and have nobody to call for help.
No, I'm not coercing people to donate. It's up to individuals to voluntarily decide whether to donate.
And if they don't make that decision to voluntarily donate, they risk having a shittier police protection, aka more theft, more murder.
Possibly. I mean, if you're not willing to lift a finger in your own defense, if you're not willing to lift a finger in your own defense by donating some money to the police force, I mean, maybe is it on them in that case? Like, is it their fault that they're not getting any protection? I mean, why should they get something for nothing?
No. Well, hold on. Yes, first of all, yes. You already said that everybody should get a baseline level of police protection. So
I'm saying they will get that.
Which you have yet to demonstrate, because if they're not donating, I don't know where that baseline police protection would even come from.
Maybe an individual won't donate, but as a community, I think they will. And if they don't, I tend to think that's their problem. Is the community not
just a group of individuals all donating?
Sure, and there's going to be a level of wealth in any given community. And I think any given community...
The police protection and the quality of your protection should not be hinged upon your wealth. Now you're trying to go around to,
sure, why not?
No,
why not?
Because why do wealthy people deserve to be protected from murder and from theft and also have a faster police response than people who are poor? Why is that the case?
I'm not saying they do deserve a faster police response.
That's what would happen if they had better funding.
They will have better private security. I mean, do you think
you're being an idiot right now? No, we're not talking about private security, dude. We're talking about calling 911 in the case of an emergency. Better funding means better police response times. What you're saying is that because they are wealthy, they deserve that because they've earned it, quote unquote. But the poor people, well, too bad because they're just not lifting a finger to help themselves. We've already established that a lot of these communities are squeezing by on 2 fucking jobs.
Well, first of all, do you want to have a civil conversation here?
I'm being incredibly civil.
Well, you just said I was being an idiot.
Yeah, that's a civil way of saying yeah, I'm being civil enough because you are being an idiot.
All right, well, I don't think if you think that's appropriate, I'm not sure that...
You're the one who who's basically arguing that rich people deserve protection from murder and poor people don't. That's not very civil either.
No, that's a straw man.
It's the logical follow-through. It is literally what would practically happen if we were to apply your worldview.
Well, that's what you think, but I don't agree with that. And I'm trying to argue why I don't think that's the right inference from my premises. We can disagree about whether that actually follows.
Okay.
But I don't think just calling me an idiot is really called for here.
Okay. So how would your solution be better? Because it almost sounds like at this point you're advocating for taxes with different steps.
I'm not advocating for taxes. I advocate for a voluntary system. I think there would be voluntary contributions from any community, regardless of the level of wealth. And I do think there might be differences in the quality of police. If you live in a very rich community, those people are going to be able to afford a better police system than a poor community. But
And that's
as I
bad.
mentioned before, I don't think economic inequality per se is a bad thing. It depends on how it came about. If you got your wealth by stealing it from somebody else, I think that's bad. That's unjust, and that should be stopped. But if you got your wealth through honest production and trade, not engaging in fraud or anything like that, and you, as a result, become wealthier, I don't see a problem with that.
So you're
I don't
talking
think
about means testing who is genuinely wealthy and who isn't to decide that overall, or to decide which wealthy person deserves a degree of better protection? Why would we do this? Why do we need to do this? Isn't taxing just much more efficient? Doesn't it make way more sense? Tax poor communities less because they have less money. Tax rich people more because they have more money, and distribute police protection across the country as adequately and equally as possible. Not to mention, if we're talking about poor communities, there would be more crime because crime follows poverty.
I don't think. Again, there's a lot going on here, so I don't think poverty is at least not the primary factor in crime. I don't think that's really what drives it. But anyway,
well, what do you think drives
it? Seems like
it?
a big. What do I think drives poverty? Maybe we can come back to that, but I don't want to get too off track.
I don't want to get too off track either. I'm curious what your response would be to the fact that historically, even people who live in poverty have higher crime rates, but then when they're no longer in poverty, they have lower crime rates. Like, it's obvious that crime follows poverty, and then crime contributes to poverty, and it becomes a vicious cycle.
I think much more important is the ideas that people hold than their level of income. So if you are a poor person and you are taught that you've been victimized by some unjust system, then you might get it in your head that it's justified for you to commit crimes. That could be one reason.
Do you think it would have something to do with maybe feeling like you have no option but to commit a crime? What if you're really poor, you're starving, and you steal from a store? I mean, could that be the case also?
I don't think it's primarily your economic situation, but I think if you are in an emergency situation, like literally you will die if you don't steal something, then I think it could be justified to steal in that very delimited case. But I think that's an emergency, very atypical sort of case, which doesn't apply in general. So I don't think that's in general a justification for stealing.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's a sociological and criminologist fact that if you are poor, you're more likely to commit crime. You're more desperate. It's obvious.
Well, there might be a correlation, but I don't think that gets at the causation of it very well. I think the ideas are much more relevant. Like if you are a poor person, but you have the ideas that it's good to respect people's rights and not use physical force to rob someone or mug somebody on the street. If you are taught something like responsibility, people should be independent and make their own way in the world, then you're going to be much less likely to commit crimes than someone who's taught you're a victim of society. You've been treated unjustly.
Do you think that maybe having poor education in general could contribute to crime behavior?
I think poor education could be a factor. I mean, I think our public education system is very poor today, and it does a very bad job of preparing children to be self-respecting, responsible, independent adults. And I think that could play a role in increasing crime. So
I don't
yeah,
even know
I
what to
think
say to you. I
that's
mean, what
one
you're talking
factor.
about right now, you're saying that the schools are bad, but yet right now, the schools that are particularly shitty are in disadvantaged communities. Right now, there is a system that, like, according to you, coerces everybody to put money into that school, and the school is still super fucking shitty. I don't know how removing that and then just saying, donate if you want to, would somehow improve anything. It would just make stuff worse.
I think competition, free competition, would make things a lot better. So if you've got a public school which gets a certain allotment of money every year from the government, regardless of how good or how bad they perform, and they don't have much of an incentive to do better. But if you have a free market system of education where you know you're going to go out of business as a school if you don't perform well, now you all of a sudden have an incentive to put in a lot of effort to make a good product and turn out good students, get good results.
But they're already getting paid, right? And the schools are not as good in these other areas because they're underfunded. Teachers
Well,
are
what I'm
already
saying
being
is I think
paid.
they're not as good as they would be in a free market system because there's no incentive to become good. They're going to get this money from the government regardless of how well they perform. Whereas if you have a competition system, they're going to go out of business. They're not going to have a job the next year, possibly, if they uh, produce very low quality results. So
What
there
if
is
they're
a
producing low
reason.
quality results not through any fault of their own? Like, a lot of these teachers in these underfunded schools are working hard as shit, and there's still poorer education because of the overall funding of the schools, and because more poverty leads to less time for academic achievement outside of the school.
I mean, there's no getting around the fact that if you don't face competition, you're not going to produce as good results. I
This is
mean, there might
actually
be
not true
individual
either. This is why
teachers.
I just brought up the power grid thing as well. There's competition in some of these areas. People still will cut corners in order to save money. This happens in construction a lot too. There are government regulations that make it so that you have to abide by certain standards. They will cut corners if those standards aren't there, regardless of the competition.
Well, if you have a government granted monopoly on something, then there's by definition not going to be competition. So if you run a public school in a given area and there's no one else can start a school, or maybe they're crowded out, people are crowded out, the investors or entrepreneurs are economically crowded out from investing in starting a school in that area because they just know that people's taxes, maybe property taxes, are already high enough that you're not going to want to put additional money into a private school. Well, now you can't compete as a private school against this government,
But
in
there's
effect,
private schools
monopoly
right
school.
now, and we already have public schools as well.
Yeah, but not nearly as many. I mean, it's a relatively small market. I think I've heard, like, I don't know what the statistics is, maybe like 90% of schools are public. But
Well, yeah, of course, but private
unfortunately,
schools offer
the
benefits that the public schools otherwise can't. This is why some parents want to send their children to a Catholic private school, because a public school can't teach religion, but a private school can.
yeah, they have more freedom and in the way they
So they're
teach. It's
offering a
not.
unique benefit as opposed to the public schools, and you're saying somehow competition would just fix this, even though right now we still have competition, and we also have private schools, or excuse me, public schools, and those public schools right now are shitty because of the funding. How would any of this improve? You're saying now because the teachers, like, I better work even harder so that I make enough money? I don't even understand. Like, if it's a salary job, that wouldn't even necessarily follow.
There's there's some competition right now, but I'm saying there's not nearly enough. So yes, there are some private schools, maybe a very small minority, 10% or whatever it is, but there would be a lot more of that. So, like, unfortunately, right now, you might have to be wealthy in order to afford to send your kids to a private school. But if we had a free market, I think costs would come down. You would see a lot more lower cost
We already have a free market.
options for what?
We already have a free market.
No, 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 no. We have nothing. This is actually one thing I wanted to talk a lot about. We have far, far from a free market today. I mean, we have a massive government intervention in the economy. Public school being a good example of this. The entire social security system, Medicare, Medicaid, public roads, all
Yes, because you can't
the
leave everything up.
regulatory
No, no, no.
agencies,
This is
all
your
of that
problem is you
is,
don't understand that there's such a thing as a market failure. And the medical side of things is actually one of those market failures. We have right now, hold on, wait. We have private medical. Wait. We have private medical. Okay?
No, we don't.
There's plenty of competition, but yet still this medical, the medical care here in America is absolute garbage with the insurance and the intertwining insurance with the care, needing to pay to have life-saving care. You talk about Medicaid, but Medicaid is also means tested. Medicaid, you can't just get on Medicaid one day if you feel like it. You only can qualify for Medicaid if you're below a certain amount of income.
Yeah, so I agree. There are lots
But
of
do you
problems.
realize the reason why that is, right? Is because people who are poor, who are lower than certain line of income, I don't know what it is exactly, do not have the same access to that medical care. Now you're going even a step further. Now it sounds like you're saying if you're wealthy, you get the better police, the better schools, and the better healthcare. And if you're poor, what? Fuck them? Unless you are lucky enough to find $5 under the vending machine on your way home that you can donate to the local police. This is ridiculous.
No, that's a straw man. It's a fact of reality that the wealthier people get better quality things, but I don't think that's an injustice.
It's not an injustice when you say better quality things. It is an injustice if the better quality thing that you're talking about is medical care, education, and police protection.
I don't think there's anything magical about healthcare or police protection or anything. Whatever field you're talking about, if you're wealthier, you're going to be able to afford better quality.
According to your worldview, wealthy people would be able to fund their own police stations more adequately, thus resulting in faster police responses and better overall police protection. They would have better police protection.
That's true of anything. They can afford better restaurants. They can afford better
restaurants. Don't matter. That's not a life or death kind of situation. The way that calling the police if you're in the case of a fucking murder is.
That's why everyone would have at least a baseline level police. And
how are they going to have okay, I'm going to make you answer this question. How are they going to have a baseline if you're not doing taxation?
Well, I've already mentioned a couple methods, donations and lotteries. There are additional mechanisms.
What makes you think that people who are already poor, who are already hardly able to support their own schools because the taxation is so low, are going to just go down to the lottery? That's an irresponsible way to spend money.
Well, I think maybe we're starting midstream here. You're already assuming they're poor, and there's also a question of relative poverty versus absolute poverty. I mean, if you're in a very primitive society of like a Stone Age kind of person, you're going to need some kind of security even in that society. It may just consist of having a spear or something very simple, but you're going to need something. But as a society or civilization advances and it becomes wealthier, you can afford higher and higher quality.
The reason for that is because of taxation.
No,
because not everybody in the country is becoming wealthier and wealthier. So what you're saying is, so there would be a baseline police protection for everybody. That baseline would still be better for the wealthy because they're able to more adequately fund the baseline police. There is no way around the fact that according to your worldview, poor people get shafted. Poor people don't get adequate access to protection from police, thus limiting their freedom, but wealthy people do. How does this make the world a better place? You're going through so many you're jumping through so many hoops just to avoid acknowledging that taxation is necessary.
No. I think you're very keen on having everybody be equal, no matter what.
In certain degrees, on certain issues, yes.
Yeah, I think that I don't think that is reasonable.
So do you
I
think that people should have equal access to cancer treatment?
No, I think people should have whatever they can voluntarily get, and that can
So then the
include
poor person
asking
doesn't
people
get
for
the
help.
cancer treatment, but the wealthy person does.
No, that doesn't necessarily follow. You can ask for voluntary assistance.
So you
Just
go and
because
ask your poor friend to give you money for the cancer treatment?
or you could ask your rich friend, or you could do some kind of crowdsourcing thing. I see people sometimes on Facebook raising money for someone who's
You
going through
realize
some
that's a
kind of
fucking problem, dude. The fact that right now there's one group of people who can afford the nicest, best medical treatment in the entire planet, and then another group of people that can't and need to resort to Facebook GoFundMe pages to try and survive deadly ailments. That's a fucking problem.
I think people would be much better off if we had freedom in the healthcare
You're
industry.
advocating
Maybe
for
they
less
need to
freedom.
resort.
There's less freedom in your
No,
worldview. In your
no,
worldview, poor people have less freedom because they're more likely to die. Poor people have less freedom because they don't have access to police the same way that rich people would. And they don't have as good education, which hinders their ability to navigate the world and become successful later on in life. Your worldview reduces freedom.
I disagree. I think yours does, and I think you're working with the wrong definition of freedom. I
I
don't
think
think
I'm
I have
working with the wrong
access.
definition of fucking human talking to you any longer. So, can you stop being so insane? Please? Do you think you can do that? You think you can work on that one for me?
Are we dropping the civility now? You're just going to go back to insults?
Yeah. Oh, I'm dropping civility now. Yeah. As soon as you say poor people don't really deserve the same care when it comes to cancer as rich people, yeah, you've lost the civility privilege, my friend.
Did I say they don't deserve it?
That's
or
the
that
logical
they
follow
won't?
through of what you've been saying this entire time. Your worldview is literally fuck the poor and the rich get all the nice shit.
No, that's a smear.
Really?
But I
The
mean,
logical conclusion of your dipshit beliefs is a smear? Well, then that's kind of on you, buddy.
and now you're going to dipshit. I mean,
Yes, you're a
drawing all
dipshit
these.
fucking piece of garbage. You're a fucking subhuman sack of shit.
All right. Well, if you're gonna,
Goodbye. Literally just can we be civil when I say that the poors deserve nothing?